Attention, the following program you're about to watch contains ideas and opinions. If you are easily offended by ideas or opinions, I suggest you refrain from watching this.
Girl, hey, you go, girl. Da girl, hey, you go, girl. Baby, girl. Say what?
Good morning, Scrubs, and welcome to Scrub Talk with Diesel, where I, Diesel, rail at you, the listener, for being a scrub. Let's talk a little bit about passion today. Passion being exactly what it sounds like. The part of you that has drive and loves and feels strongly about a particular topic. In this case, we're talking about passion in games and what passion is good for and bad for. Now, I'm going to talk about the uses of passion positively later, but first I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you let your passion overwhelm you and cause problems in your card gaming. I am talking, of course, about salt. This is the deal. When your passion overtakes you and you eventually let it become rage, and then you fester on that rage, this is what we call salt, or being salty. A lot of people will use different terms for it, but in general, people believe, especially scrubs, to be major salty. Today I'm going to teach you how to avoid seeming like you're being salty, or how not to be salty, and even talking a little bit about how to keep each other from becoming salty. There's a reason for all of this, but the main thing is that as players of the game, we want to do the best that we can. And sometimes we get a little too hype, and we let our emotions get the better of us. But if we continue to raise a community that believes that it's okay to just get angry about something, or to berate others because they're upset about something that they feel is legitimate, then we are causing our community to lower in quality. And overall, the best thing that we can do in order to make the game the most interesting, the most fun, and the most competitive for everyone is to learn how to navigate this salty mountain. We should probably talk a little bit about salt and where the terminology comes from, along with where it comes from within you. Salt is actually a phrase way, way older than probably most of us are. It spawned originally to mean ill-tempered or quick to get angry from the 1930s. And in general, there used to be a phrase called salty sailor. A sailor obviously works at sea, and the sea is full of salt water. But the notion of being a salty sailor was that you worked so long on deck and worked so hard that you became easy to anger and easy to deal out negativity. So the idea of becoming a salty sailor eventually made its way into competition and just became salt. When we talk about salt, I think it's interesting that we use salt as a metaphor, because salt can mean a lot of different things. But in general, when you are quick to anger and you are ready to go, ready to fight, ready to defend yourself, ready to believe in whatever, you're full of salt. And a lot of times this comes from you feeling like you did everything the way you were supposed to, and things didn't go your way. It's very rarely that people feel super salty about something that they believe to be their fault. But in our games, we have to remember that sometimes it is our fault. So let's talk about things that you can do to try to stay away from being salty. I'm going to try not to get too philosophical on you guys today, but I do want you to know that when it comes to playing cards, everything happens for a reason. And when I say everything, I mean every loss happens for a reason. Now, sometimes you might feel like a loss is out of your control, and on occasion it is. Sometimes you just don't draw the hand that you need, or sometimes resources don't crop up when you need them, or too many resources show up and not enough things to use those resources on. Sometimes you'll feel like the deck that you've worked so hard on building and playing correctly has betrayed you. And for the most part, those statistical anomalies are kept low through the mechanics of the game. I do know for a fact that there are players out there who think that every single game that they lose is due to an error of the deck. That the deck didn't do what it was supposed to do, that the deck was built wrong, or the deck was missing something. And to do so causes you to lose quite a bit of what's important for you to remember. You're not always right. When you think that something is wrong with your deck because you keep losing, sometimes you lose sight of the fact that maybe you are not playing the deck correctly. Sometimes you make misplays. Sometimes a misplay is so vague and elusive that you don't even know it's a misplay while you're doing it. You think it's the right move and it turns out not to be. Sometimes that has to do with your opponent's playing. Sometimes your opponent's just better than you. And they have an idea of what they want to get done and they execute it better than you do. But regardless of that, you guys got to get through your head that you are not always right about the reasons that you lost a game. Because if you can, and you can examine your games more carefully, you will eventually realize that there are parts of you that you can fix to make those games go a lot smoother. Now, this is just to help prevent salt within yourself. Whenever you see yourself getting mad about a situation or brooding over a game or whatnot, you got to remember that sometimes things are out of your control, and sometimes you're wrong about them being out of your control, and maybe you could have played better. But that means learning to play better, not getting mad about the results of a particular outcome. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you can do to keep people around you from feeling salty. You ever meet that guy at your tournament that you played a good game, you did your best, you shake hands, you lost, it happens, and you are explaining it to a friend because they asked you about it. How'd you do in the round? Oh, I lost. And then that guy comes over. That guy who's like, oh, you mad, bro? Salty? Feeling a little salt? You got that salt going on in you? And no matter how much you deny it, you can't convince this person that you're not angry. And just their presence and their delight in the idea that you would be angry starts making you angry. I'm sure that most of the people listening to this have been there before. And if you haven't been there before, you're that guy that nobody likes who keeps trying to get people to be salty. Congratulations. Go away. Here's the thing. When you make fun of a player for losing, you give them the notion that it's not okay to lose. And that's not true. It's totally okay to lose. In fact, it's expected. Even if you are the best player in the world, you're going to face some losses. And you learn more from a loss than you do from a win anyway, because it gives you a chance to see what you did wrong, what's wrong with your deck, what's wrong with the environment that you're playing in, and gives you a chance to fix it to make a better scene. The problem is that when each other press, when you try hard to force the idea that somebody has to be mad about a loss, you give them that notion that they just have to shut down and not talk to you. Open communication is the only way to truly learn about yourself and about each other. So you have to stop salting people's wounds. Do not give them a reason to feel like they shouldn't talk to you about why something happened or whether or not it happened or even how they feel. Because in the end, you're all supposed to be friends. And friends are nice to each other, right? Right? Let's talk a little bit about those famous things that we all have heard about and love. Pro tips. Pro tips, by definition, are tips from professional players on how to play professionally. This show, other than being called Scrub Talk, could be considered an idea of a pro giving tips, hence pro tips. Okay? Now, pro tips are an interesting thing in our world. The idea of what makes it a pro tip is very fluid. Often, pro tip is used sarcastically to one another to give each other an idea that the same things happen to everybody, which is actually kind of a good thing. You ever had a friend who's like, you're playing a game and you're like, oh, I just didn't draw the good hand, and they're like, not playing those pro plays, man. Pro tip, always draw what you need. You know, you laugh because obviously you can't fix what you draw, so they're just being snarky. But the notion of actual pro tips, the idea of giving someone advice on how they play or what they do, is very, very subtle situation. And if you do it wrong, you can cause a lot of salt in the player. So I'm going to give you some pro tips on giving pro tips. First thing about pro tips you need to realize. If you are not a professional player, do not give someone a pro tip. Giving people advice is okay. And even if you're an amateur player, if you see something that someone's doing wrong, you should help them by giving them a correct idea or by helping mold them toward the right direction. However, it is the most insulting thing ever when the player in your store, who's considered to be amongst the lowest of the new players, doesn't really know anything about a game, goes, pro tip, I think that you should actually draw 2 cards to the opening hand. Something that you can't do, or something that is obvious to everybody, something that you already know, isn't advice when it's given to you by someone who you feel like you regularly beat on a normal basis. It feels like you're getting made fun of. So, if you're not a pro and you want to give advice, you got to come about it a different way. You've got to say, hey, I know that normally you're higher in the ranks than me, but shouldn't you be doing da-da-da this? And maybe you'll learn something that you didn't know. Or maybe that player will hear what you say and not automatically dismiss it. Because the problem with automatically dismissing advice from anybody is that sometimes they're right. Because again, you're not always right. Another thing you might do when giving a pro tip is to wait for the storm to pass. Now, the storm that I'm talking about is that initial feeling of anger or distress or hatred or loserly feeling that someone gets right after they've lost a game. Nobody likes losing a game. Winning is sort of the point of competitive play. Even if you want to have fun and you want to do cool combos and do the right thing, in the end, it always feels great when you win. And therefore, it does not feel good when you don't win. But if you see someone starting to feel salty, the worst thing you can do is get up in their face and go, oh, by the way, you did this, this, and this wrong, and make them feel even crappier for doing as badly as they did. So wait for that initial feeling of bad to go away before you decide to give anybody any tips on how they should play their game. Also, it helped them get past the storm before you give them any ideas. That way, they know that you're on their side, that ultimately what you're trying to do is make them be a better player. This goes right back to salting the wound. If you salt a wound and make them feel bad beforehand, why would they take advice from you? Think about it. The next topic I want to talk about has to do with accepting advice, not giving it. When it comes to advice, it's there to make you a better player. Some of it's right, some of it's wrong. But you should always be ready to accept advice. Accept all advice. Now, what advice you use is a different story. Look, it's a long road to the top. And sometimes you get bumps along the way. Some players have been playing for years trying to be competitive players with no luck. Other players start up and immediately start getting their wins and start moving up. But they still have a long way to go to become good players. And all advice is useful in the fact that it can at least help you think about the kind of player that you are. So, when you're accepting advice, you have to figure out whether or not you're going to use it and how you're going to use it. A couple things about using advice. One is don't use too much advice at the same time. Alright? Like I said, it's a long road to the top, and you have time to push yourself and shape yourself into the player that you want to be. So if you know that there are 3 or 4 things wrong with what you do, going by the advice of the people that have helped you try to become a better player, you don't want to try to change all 4 of those things at once. Try to change one of them and get yourself perfected enough that that's happening. Then move on to the next one. Make sure that your correctness and procedure doesn't change while you're trying to learn how to be a better player, because it becomes a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. If you take it as a piece by piece evaluation of you as a player, you can fix all those things with relative ease just by taking them one at a time. The other thing about using advice is that some players will ask you, or rather they will give you a piece of advice expecting to use it, and maybe you won't use it right away, or you don't have any intentions of using it. But if that's true, don't make that player feel bad for giving you advice. They're just trying to help. So make sure that if you choose not to use their advice, you at least thank them for it and you let it be. Don't try to make their advice out to be a hindrance to you. And if they are not ready to accept advice for themselves, then there's a good chance that they're not ready to give advice. So remember that when you are using their advice. In general, I want you guys to become better players. And all advice is good advice. So, think about it. So we've talked about the bad. Using salt and being angry and not progressing because you're too emotional about things. But passion isn't devoid from the game. And there are ways to use passion effectively. I'll give you an example. Whenever I am passionate about being competitive in a game, I will call up a friend of mine and we will go sit someplace. Usually a fast food place or a restaurant that allows us to sit and play. And we'll order breakfast and we'll play. And we'll play. And then we'll eat lunch. And then we'll play. And we'll play. We'll eat dinner. And then we'll play. I'm saying that sometimes we'll sit anywhere from 8 to 10, sometimes 14 hours just playing the game. And that doesn't come from a place of, I want to get better so that I can win. It comes from genuine passion for the game. You've got to love what you do. I love playing card games, as does my friend. So we can play for 14 hours straight and not have any problems with jealousy or anger or whatever. Or if we do have problems, we skip past them. Now, I want to remind you guys, I'm not perfect. Obviously. Just like the rest of you, I am bad. Most of the time. And using my passion effectively means understanding that sometimes I'm going to be angry. I'm going to get salty. Everybody does it. It's a natural progression of being passionate about stuff. But I sometimes have to remember that using my drive means pushing past that, getting past that anger quickly, letting go of a game that it ultimately won't matter. It's just a string of 100 games or 1,000 games that's going to make me a better player. So remembering that will often help me overcome my salt monster quickly and get back into doing what I love to do, playing the game. Having a partner who's understanding of that is always a good thing when it comes to consistently playing over and over again. You have to have someone who knows your faults and that you know their faults, and you work together to overcome the problems that you can change while being willing to accept that you are different people and sometimes you'll react to things in different ways. But remember that passion is essential for competitive play. If you are not passionate about what you do, then you cannot possibly hope to get to the highest level of play. One more example on that. I met a guy a long time ago. When I was 21, he was 16, and he was playing these games and loving them. I met him a little later in life when he was 21. And we got together at a card shop and played the game, and we played a couple turns. He saw the writing on the wall, and he conceded. And then, right after conceding, he pretty much immediately dropped. And I was just talking to this guy, and I asked him, what happened to you? What changed that made you forget that these games were supposed to be fun? And he's like, what do you mean fun? He's like, winning's fun. I like winning. But I don't have fun playing the game anymore. And I'm like, that's why you're not good at the game anymore. And he, at first he was insulted, and then he just kind of shrugged and looked at me with just the saddest eyes I've seen and went, you're right. I'm not as good at this game as I used to be. But as long as I can still win, I guess it doesn't matter. And walked away. So I went on the rest of that tournament to go undefeated and get some packs, which was great. But I couldn't let go of this guy and what he said. He had lost his passion for the game. And that's all the time we have for Scrub Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode and use the advice that I give you in order to help yourselves and others become better players. Remember, unless we can effectively talk about what makes us bad players, we cannot find the road to becoming good ones. Keep scrubbing, friends.